I like a lot of different kinds of movies. For example, I like big blockbusters, I like comedies, I like musicals, but I also like weird art house movies. Stuff like I'm Thinking of Ending Things, which came out in 2020, really stuck with me for a long time. Beau is Afraid was a recent one that I really liked. Or even something like Stanley Kubrick's later filmography, which is a bit more mainstream, but his movies are usually still really weird. I saw the new movie by Yorgos Lanthimos recently called Kinds of Kindness, which reminded me that I kind of tried to make a weird movie like that in 2018. I called it Paul. Not the Simon Pegg Paul that I still haven't seen and I probably should see. This is my own movie called Paul. I think I started writing it towards the end of high school senior year, and then I filmed it that summer right after I graduated. I was trying to make a weird art house horror movie that required further analysis to understand. It was open to interpretation and intentionally very strange and confusing. My feelings about this movie now are kind of conflicted. There's certainly things I wish I had done differently and things that aren't the greatest. Sometimes I just straight up don't like the movie at all, but other times I'm drawn to it and I feel proud of what I accomplished. The film is 30 minutes long, which is the longest professional film I've ever done up to this point. I was inspired by things like The Shining, Hereditary, and strangely a little bit of Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. I was also inspired by characters like the Joker, and I wanted to have my own character kind of like that. The lead actor, Eric, who plays Paul, is actually great in this movie. My mentor in high school, who's also in the movie, introduced me to Eric, and he had never done acting to this magnitude before.
Well, so I've actually done some acting work before, but it was only ever for like music videos for friends, that sort of thing. But nothing quite of the magnitude that was presented before me. You know, actually like saying lines and actually acting out the scenes. The transition between music and the connection between music and acting is really not that far off, to be honest. Because music it's all about, in a live setting, it's all about performing certain parts that you need to do within a time frame, with the right expression, with the right creativity, with the right motives. Acting is really not that different from, say, playing a live show, because instead of, you using an instrument, it's you kind of expressing yourself. You have to basically use your body and your voice as an instrument. So the transition between a live performer and an actor was relatively seamless as soon as I started to look at it that way. Instead of a guitar, it's my body, it's my expression. That's the instrument that I need to play in a live setting.
I soon discovered that you sometimes don't even need training to be a good actor, because Eric killed it, even with the terrible dialogue I gave him. I'm going to get into this movie and talk about some spoilers and some of the behind the scenes process. I know this video probably won't get a lot of views, but I felt like doing this anyway. If you want to watch the movie in its entirety, I have it linked in the description. Let's talk about this thing. Trying to give a logline explaining what Paul is about is not very easy. There's a huge twist a little over halfway through, and I didn't want people to know about that, so I guess a logline could be a haunted and mysterious young man looks back on a few significant moments in his life. However, the movie doesn't even start with Paul himself. It starts with a teacher being interviewed about alleged sexual misconduct. Probably not something you were expecting to hear today. This was actually the last scene we filmed. I came up with it last minute because I wanted to add something more to the opening. This character is Mr. Miller, played by my film mentor in high school, Jim Shields. This was filmed at a local camera place, and there was this guy there helping us.
Nate, it's been pretty interesting to see you evolve as a filmmaker, because I've just seen your confidence grow so much. I mean, even today, for instance, with this interview, this is something that, you had your cut already made, and you had looked at it and decided, this needs something else. So now we're actually shooting some pickup scenes that, that was something that when I first met you, you never would have thought of that. You would have felt like, hey, if no one told me to do this shot, I'm not going to do this shot. But now I think that's a really good example of just being here today, doing the extra pickups.
This was 2018, so the Me Too movement was huge at the time, and it was on my mind a little bit. The film explores various forms of abuse, so that was the main reason I put the sexual misconduct plot into the movie. This scene was inspired by a specific interview James Franco did with Stephen Colbert after he was accused of a bunch of bad stuff. I actually hate that I put opening credits in this interview scene. I was trying to be like theatrical movies or a TV show, which typically have opening credits that play along the footage, But this was a short film. Opening credits were an extremely unnecessary thing to add, and they're really distracting here. I also feel like this scene goes on for too long. There's a part where it seems like it's about to end and then it doesn't. I would cut it shorter if I made this today. Jim is really good in this movie though. This was a very weird role for him to take for obvious reasons. I wish I had handled communicating with him about this role a lot better than I did, but he did it anyway and I'm grateful. We're still in touch and he's like my second dad. It's always good to spend time with him. We've talked about this off camera before, but I was curious if you remember how I pitched this movie to you in the way back when we did it originally. If not, I will explain it.
I mean, I don't recall. I recall being surprised when I read my character.
Yes.
So I don't think the pitch included all the details.
Yeah. Well, from what I remember, I just wrote the script. I couldn't think of a name for your character yet, but I knew I wanted you to play it because you're a good actor and I've worked with you before. So I just put Mr. Shields. And I didn't give you any warning. I just sent you the script like that, and then you read this character that was like a creepy person, and it had your name on it. I feel so bad about that.
I mean, it's no big deal. I mean, and I remember asking you at the time, like, "Hey, can we call this person something different?"
Yeah.
And you said, "Sure." So it was not an issue. It was no problem.
Yeah.
I mean, it would have been a problem if you said no.
Yeah, right. We then cut to a bunch of establishing shots of a cabin in the woods. This wasn't the first time I used this set. There's another movie I used it in. It's kind of a cool place to film at, so I wanted to take advantage of it. We find out that Paul, our main character, is staying here for some reason. This is in color, implying that the scene with Mr. Miller was a flashback of sorts because it was in black and white. I was kind of obsessed with the idea of alternating between black and white and color at the time. I think it was just because I hadn't seen a lot of movies that had done that, so I thought I was being cool and original. I wasn't though. There's plenty of movies that have done things like that before. Even Wizard of Oz kind of did it way back in 1939. Paul just kind of wakes up and walks outside, and that's it for that scene. We cut to another flashback where he's working at a farm and he meets a girl that he starts talking to. This all happens very slowly with very long shots, which was intentional. The Shining has a bunch of slowly paced scenes where there's not much happening and ominous music is playing, so I was trying to replicate that feeling as if you never know when something horrific might come around the corner. There's a scene where he has dialogue with the Allison character, and it's really bad. At the time, I wanted Paul to be really awkward and weird, so I guess if you look at it that way, it might not be too awful, but for me, the awkwardness is too much. Allison is kind of just as awkward as he is, and it doesn't work.
People always seem to want to avoid me since I'm quiet.
I feel like people are the same way about me as well.
Yeah? We sound like two peas in a pod.
I don't blame Eric or Hannah who played these characters, I blame my writing and my direction. I also really didn't like cutting back then, so a lot of these scenes have very minimal angle changes. I learned later that doing more cuts and angle changes is typically a lot better than the alternative, and I should have used some of those angles that I never ended up using.
Look, all I wanted to do was take you to Flavor Town.
I'm sorry, I don't think that would be a good idea.
It's Guy Fieri. It's diners, drive-ins, and dives.
I know, but
Barbecue
I'm
sauce.
a vegan, so I can't.
Really?
We cut back to the present day again, and he just kind of walks into the woods up to a canvas, and it takes him a long-ass time to do it. I could have cut around this to make it so much quicker, but again, there was a certain style I was definitely trying to replicate here. Oh yeah, Paul is a painter for some reason. I just added that in an attempt to give him some sort of characterization. We cut to a scene where Paul interacts with Mr. Miller, and it becomes obvious that there's some sort of past between them. I also hate this shot because Jim is clearly out of focus. Somehow the black and white makes it look a little more forgivable than it actually is. There's another scene where Paul talks to Allison and bonds with her a little bit, and he finds out about the fact that she has an abusive fiancé. This dialogue continues to be really bad.
He called me a whore.
Well, are you?
Of course I'm not.
My brother shows up as this boyfriend character and drives away with her, and then Paul looks out at them menacingly. I will say that there are some shots in this movie that I really like. We had fun coming up with a lot of these compositions. We have a scene where they're both talking in the woods and someone is clearly after them. I remember this being the first scene we filmed. It was a crazy way to start. The abusive boyfriend takes his knife and thrusts it against Paul, but Paul doesn't seem to be that upset about being threatened. In fact, he starts laughing like a maniac. He has his Joker laugh moment. Eric was committed already. He gave this scene his all.
No, but seriously, get into it. You know, like really pretend that Hannah's your fiance, and
Yeah, he's active.
I mean, I just remember Eric just being so on when we were doing it. He just seemed to really embody like every shot. I remember specifically being in the woods, him behind that tree.
That was like the first day.
Old tree, yeah. That was, and he just always came up with cool ideas for how we could do the shot and how we could get more into it. He was one of those actors who a lot of times you're kind of dreading that person who's going to be the actor who gives you cues, but his were always really good. Like, he seemed to really understand what you were going for. And
I remember we put duct tape on that knife, though, to make it a little more safe. But, we kind of did dangerous things in this movie, and it definitely made me learn later on that, safety is important. Safety is more important than making a movie, like... This is one of the first big indications that there is something sinister about Paul. There's a quick exchange between Paul and Mr. Miller, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. Basically, Mr. Miller is too drunk to drive and wants a ride from Paul, but Paul is using Mr. Miller's car. You'd think Mr. Miller would call an Uber or something, not make his former student drive him home and leave his car behind. It would have been easy to rewrite this so that it made more sense.
Okay, maybe this isn't a good idea. I should probably...
It's not like a little kid's mic found. We're going to run over those little kids on the way. You're like, I remember this when I was 7. It seemed a lot wider.
Yeah.
I thought I could drive a truck through here. Oh, that's right. It was a Tonka truck.
Yeah. We're good. I got this.
You filming this whole thing?
Not on purpose.
Paul takes Miller to the middle of nowhere and shoots him, and I love how it doesn't take until after Paul parks for Mr. Miller to ask the question,
Hey, why are we stopping here?
So yeah, that's the big twist. Paul is a serial killer. In my mind, Paul is kind of a crazy vigilante serial killer who takes out abusive people. The name Paul Michael is actually taken from a real-life serial killer that I heard about at the time. We have a quick little scene between the abusive boyfriend and Allison, and the dialogue is still bad.
Stop being a hooker for all I care.
Paul sneaks into the house and kills the abusive boyfriend, and you can see a weird scarecrow-looking thing in the background. In the credits, I think I referred to it as a demon, but it looks more like a scarecrow, and that's what we called it on set. This technically isn't the first time this thing has appeared in the movie. There's a few other scenes where we hit it in the background. I won't reveal all the shots where the scarecrow shows up, so if you want, you can go through the movie and find the other hidden scarecrows in the background. Finally, we get back to present day, and the scarecrow shows up. The beginning of this scene is actually vaguely based on a dream I had, although I think in my dream it was a clown instead of a scarecrow. Again, lots of long shots where nothing happens, and then the scarecrow chases him up to the weird cabin. Paul shoots the scarecrow, and then he takes the scarecrow's mask off. Of course it's his own face looking back at him, which I think I thought was clever at the time, but it's not. That's been done many times already. Paul starts losing his mind and laughs for a while, and then he grabs a bunch of guns and puts them in a case. This is so over the top. Oh my god. He approaches a new girl with his case of guns, and I guess the cycle is starting over again? Well, that's it. That's the end.
May it be an evening star.
Oh wait, I guess you were probably wondering what the hell that entire climax was. Well, I don't feel like saying, because I feel like that ruins the open to interpretation aspect of the film. I have ideas as to what it could mean, but honestly part of it was I just thought the scarecrow idea was cool and wanted to do it.
I think something that really caught my attention in the script was Paul Michael's relationship to the scarecrow in the film. The scarecrow kind of represents a bunch of different things. It represents, in my eyes, I think the scarecrow is kind of Paul Michael's nemesis. I think that's his kind of like doppelganger. So the way I viewed reading the script was like the scarecrow kind of represented his past actions and his guilt and like manifested all of that stuff into like this being, which ended up being this tangible thing that came after him. But I think the symbolism in the script was important as well, because I think it really kind of puts an emphasis on that if we do enough evil stuff in our life, then eventually it'll come back to haunt us. You know, nobody can run away from the things that they've done forever. His past is basically coming back to him, and it's unavoidable, which is true in real life.
I also kind of did a similar thing with my movie Shoulder Angel. It's a different creature, but it's still an alter ego of sorts. Spoilers, the main character ends up taking a gun and shooting it just like in this movie. Shoulder Angels is better than this film, obviously, but my point is I think Paul as a film has some good ideas. So much so that I was able to use a few of them and repurpose them in other movies. Paul had a mixed reception from people I've shown it to. Some people really liked it and did their best to analyze the themes of the film, and others were very honest about their dislike of it. I think both reactions are valid. I've made better movies since Paul, but there's a reason I'm still occasionally proud of this movie. We were creative with it, and I learned a lot from it. The movies I made after Paul are certainly more mainstream, and that's fine, there's nothing wrong with that. But I wonder if I should try to do a more weird, abstract kind of movie again someday. I just kinda made the movie I wanted to make, and I'm proud of that fact. Even if the movie that came out of it is really pretentious. I also had a ton of fun on set. We all had a great time despite how dark the movie is.
Be ready to throw.
Right.
Go!
Keith Ledger.
You know, it always fascinated me. I would always look at a canvas and just see something crazy pop into my mind.
Aha.
Aha, a he, a who, and I thought my jokes were bad. You want to know how I got these scars?
There was a point in 2019 where I wanted to make a prequel to Paul. I had a whole script written and I showed it to the potential cast and everything, but it was so ambitious that we ended up not doing it. It was going to explore two main characters, Paul and his sister Lily, who were being abused by their father. Lily would seem like the main character at first. The movie is even called Lily, at least that's what I was thinking of calling it. And Paul is a supporting character through most of the movie, and his name would never be stated on screen until the very end. So basically, audiences wouldn't know that this was a prequel to Paul until we reveal at the very end that Eric is playing the same character, in a plot twist. I hope that makes sense. I don't know if I explained that well, but at the end of the movie, Lily gets accidentally killed by her abusive drug dealer boyfriend, which sends Paul on his first murder spree, killing her abusive boyfriend and killing his own abusive father. There's a lot more to it, but that was the basic summary. Basically, Paul was abused in this prequel script, and so was his sister, leading to her death. So that's what pushes him to become the abuser-killing vigilante that we see in Paul. He kind of just loses his mind after going through so many traumatic events. It's kind of like Joker, even though Joker hadn't even come out yet. He starts off in the script as a nice guy, and by the end of the movie, he's turned into a killer. Another Batman comparison I can make is Harvey Dent in The Dark Knight. It was very dark, and I'm kind of glad we didn't make it. It was honestly too depressing. At the very least, my other movies, Shoulder Angels and Men Don't Cry, are kind of like unofficial prequels to Paul if you want to look at them that way. I did a whole other video talking about how my brother Jake and my teacher Jim could be playing the same characters in those movies that they played in Paul. I won't get into that here, that's a whole separate video I already made, and you can check it out in the description, I'll leave a link there. I also need to take a moment to talk about Eric. I already talked a little bit about how I think he's really good in this movie, and he is, but he was also an extremely sweet person. He was always so nice to me, and I'll always be grateful for that.
I recall that you were in college, you were studying film at Champlain, and you were saying to me how you were having a hard time finding actors who would kind of like could A, do the work, and B, like commit to the time. And I thought about Eric because I'd seen him around, and he was just the kind of guy where you knew, like, he always had this kind of Nicolas Cage vibe to me where he just wanted to be outrageous, and he usually was. It just seemed like he would be perfect. So I had him contact you, and it was just so great to reconnect with him. And I feel really good that it really was a good instinct because he got really into those roles. And I think he really helped make those movies what they were. To be on the set with him, he just really immersed himself in the role and in the whole experience. And he never seemed like there was someplace else he had to be. It always felt like he was present and really cared about what was happening.
I tried working with him on every film I made after this, and we did a few more things, but it got to a point where he was too busy, and we kind of stopped working together and seeing each other altogether. In hindsight, I wish I could have hung out with him outside of just making movies together. I should have fostered that connection I had with him more than I did. I'm talking about him in past tense because in 2022, he very sadly passed away. It was obviously a huge blow for me. I don't know if I ever fully processed that loss. Not only did he act in the movie, but he composed a few songs for it too. One of them is in the movie, but the other one went unused because I don't think it fit with the tone of the film. It was a good song, I just didn't think it fit with this particular movie. I'm making a comedy film now, so my plan is to find a way to include the unused song as a way to tribute Eric. He was also extremely funny on set, constantly quoting memes and movies. He was a big fan of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man and Waluigi and all this stuff I loved talking with him about. He was a very talented musician, making his own metal music. He's on Spotify, and he has an entire album. I'll link his YouTube channel in the description if anyone is interested in supporting the legacy he left behind. I know if Eric were around, he wouldn't want me to keep being sad over his passing. He would want me to remember his humor and his kindness, and that's what I plan on continuing to do.
Oh no, Dr. Connor's class. I got so caught up in what I was doing, I forgot all about it. He's gonna kill me.
I just made a pot of Who wants coffee?
I met Eric when he was a junior in high school. He joined Big Picture Learning, and I was a teacher in Big Picture Learning. I was one of the advisors, and Eric was in my advisory. Yeah, he would try just about anything. I mean, I remember being on our first camping trip. We hiked the second highest mountain in the Adirondacks called Algonquin. It's about 5,100 feet, and only a handful of kids made it to the top. And I remember Eric doing it, and I think he didn't bring any water. I can't remember, but I remember him really being thirsty, but getting to the top. One of my favorite memories of Eric was at one of his exhibitions of learning. So I think it was his last one of his junior year. He came dressed as Pyramid Head from Silent Hill with a full body, like hatchet head wedge thing. So he shows up as Pyramid Head with his electric guitar and just plays, I'm going to say it was a 5 to 10 minute, just heavy metal solo. And that was kind of the way he kicked off his exhibition. And then to close his exhibition, he shared with us his gamer drink formula that he had concocted. I do remember Mountain Dew Code Red, Red Bull maybe, and some 5-hour energies mixed together in some proportion. And he had like shots of that he passed out so all the teachers and students and administrators could try the drink that Eric used to keep himself up all night mastering the games that he loved to play. So that was pretty cool. That was just a great example of Eric feeling comfortable and wanting to do things his own way, which really kind of summed up the kind of guy he was.
I won't get into personal details, but I went through a really rough time in, 2019, I think this is when this was, and he made a really nice video for me as a response to that.
If you need someone to talk to about anything at all, man, I don't give a shit. Just reach out to me, okay? I want you to know that there's at least someone else who might not fully really understand what it is that you're going through, but there's someone else who can try. Just reach out if you need me, okay? I'm wishing the best for you.
He always spoke highly of me, and I don't know if I always deserved it, but I'm so grateful for him.
We don't see a lot of films like this these days, where it's psychological, it's open-ended. So I think Nate kind of going off the the beaten path is very, very ambitious, and I really do believe that in enough time, with enough practice, we're gonna start hearing about him pretty soon. I have no doubt about that.
Alright, that'll be the whole video because it's complimenting me. No, I'm kidding.
No, I mean that's how I feel, man.
Yeah, thanks.
I think you did a fantastic job, and like I said, if you just keep at it, you're gonna get really, really good at it. So,
Thanks.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for watching this video, everyone, and I hope you look forward to my film I'm making and whatever else I decide to make for this channel. See you all in the next video.